welcome. I'm Kritika Saxena. Welcome to this very special chat. Now, this week marks the occasion of the International Women's Day. Every year, when it's the run-up to the International Women's Day, we, for about 30-odd days, talk about women leadership, women in tech, women in science. What are the barriers? What's left? In fact, a UN report states that if you look at global technology companies, 20 of the large global technology companies, about 33% of the workforce is women, but 1 in 3 leaders or other superiors or managers are women. To bridge this, UN says it's going to take about 140 years for that gender parity to be fixed. There are a lot of statistics like that, but it's important to see this closer home. Let's understand what role technology will play. Let's understand what role you and me can play. And let's also go a little deeper to understand what we as a community can do to take this conversation really forward and just go beyond the same old conversations that we come to. So joining me is an eminent panel of lovely ladies, lovely TCSers, starting with Sangeeta, Chandran, Global Head of TCS Cares, Prabha Thomas, Chief Risk and Compliance Officer, and Rosemary, Hegde, Global Head of Life Sciences and Healthcare. We have a very diverse panel, women who have been there, done that, broken barriers, and not made any noise about that. So, ladies, firstly, thank you so much for talking to us. It's a pleasure to chat about this very interesting conversation, but I'm going to start with you, Prabha. You're at a position where, and I remember having this conversation with you at some point, where you see very few women leaders in your sector. I don't know that many chief risk and compliance officers who are women. Again, whenever we say this, it sounds stereotypical to you and me, but it is a fact. What do you think has shifted in the last few years? And do you feel that today, as things stand and as how you see the coming decade, do you feel things are different?
Yeah, thank you, Kritika, first of all, for having me here. Over the years, if you look at my career in the last 30 years, we've been through many different roles, right? Yeah. Starting with, basic a role like, let's say, a developer when you start joining in this organization, and then you move on to management roles, project management, and so on. Over the years, the good thing is that we have seen that many different roles in TCS, whether it's a sales role, whether it is a corporate, lead roles, or business head roles, are more and more open to women, and we love to see women coming up. Yeah. And while you may not know many women, I have to say that over the last many years, I know many peers, many colleagues in other industries as well, and we are seeing more of women in these roles. And this is very, very empowering, which is also very interesting because younger women, come up to us and simply say that, we are very happy to just see you all there, Yeah. And that's, I think, a very important thing for all of us women to support other women in their aspirations and in their dreams to come up to roles that they want to.
Yeah. Similar point to you, Rosemary. You've gone across sectors. You've seen various industries, various units. Tell me a little bit, as things stand, and you're in a very interesting sector. Life sciences and healthcare is something which, yes, we are seeing headway. But when you meet enterprises, do you see that the boardroom shift?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting point, Kritika, because as you said, I've been in other industries. Yeah. And when I came to life science and healthcare, one very important aspect I noted is the shift in the gender space that we have, especially in leadership, and even from the industry, coming from our customers. You can see the change in the conversation, in the understanding, in the kind of diversity of thought, because there is a large percentage of women in leadership in the industry, in life science and healthcare, and it is pretty empowering. And this is the first time I've led a team in business services, BPS, where I've seen that we have 54% women.
Wow.
Yeah, compared to... And that's an... sorry
so
about that.
All your teams have more women than men, right?
Mine does, yes.
Mine yours does. As well.
Wow. So you picked the right people today.
But I want to go a little deeper into the thought process as well. Sangeeta, how's your experience been? Are you more confident now? Because I do see at least some shift when it comes to the last decade. I do see a lot of people I mean, this is no longer just restricted to, you know, dinner table conversation. It is something that everybody talks about. It's something that, I mean, if you are not going to have inclusivity, it is going to impact your balance sheet. So do you feel the mindset shift now?
So Kritika, you know, as you were saying, this is a conversation we've had for eons and eons.
Eons, yeah.
And I think somewhere it's dropping. The thought is like sort of clicking. And I think we can see that in many ways. I think one is that the inclusion conversation has moved beyond the ticking of the box to some real actions, and we can see that. We can, even in media, when you look at it, look at the stories which come out. They're not just talking about giving people roses and chocolates on Women's Day, but the kind of conversations which are happening. So I think it's definitely shifting. Is it shifting fast enough? I don't think so. So, you know, definitely all of us would like it to shift far faster than what it is.
Yeah.
But yes.
Definitely more than 140 years, right?
For sure, for sure. 140, I'm sorry, I'm not willing to accept that 140
I think none of us will, right?
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely.
Okay. Let's go a little deeper. We are right now empowered with technology in a way that we never have been before. I want to ask each of you, what role to your mind, let's start with you, Sangeeta, what role to your mind technology is going to play in bridging that gap in some way? Or will it actually make it worse?
So, you know, like this is the year that UN has said digital, right? I
Exactly.
mean, everybody's talking about how the digital, world is actually supposed to bridge the gap, but we are also seeing the red flags around how there are, huge gaps which are coming in, right? And that is true because anything, any tool, any path-breaking thing which happens, if we do not take people along with it, that gap is going to come in, right? So we're seeing the same thing happen in the digital world, whether it is, access, which is such a huge thing, whether it is, bringing in the perspective of different diverse groups when you develop anything which is digital. So that gap is certainly being seen. And, people are raising that. And I think it's a good thing that people are raising it because then there's a chance to correct, right?
Yeah.
So starting with access, about 1/3 of the women in our country have access to the internet compared to more than 50% of the women, the men who have it, right? That itself tells you a story of how empowered you are where anything, access to anything digital is concerned.
Exactly. Prabha, the same point to you, and we were talking earlier, and that was a very interesting thing that we actually are at a very interesting balance where it could actually make things worse. I mean, it could actually make a parity tougher. So where is that balance? Where is that line where you actually use technology to empower and not break?
See, today, if you see, digital technologies are all pervasive, right?
Yeah.
Anything that we do today is all digital, whether it is, you want to do shopping, whether you want to go to the bank, you want to go to the doctor, everything touches, digital. So like Sangeeta said, access is very important.
Yeah.
What is the access to the internet? Because it has to start with the basic access to the internet, right?
Exactly.
Once we cross that, assume that itself is the first problem, but once you cross that, then you look at the technologies which are out there. Today, ChatGPT has caught the world by storm.
Yes.
Everybody is only talking about
Yes.
it. So AI and other generative AI, machine learning are there to stay, and there's a huge, huge potential in terms of what a business can do, communities can do with that technology. But the risk that comes along with it is how it is being used. See, anything, when we say artificial intelligence, it is something it is trained to do. It will do as it is trained. And therefore, who trains the artificial intelligence, what's the kind of data set that goes into training it, will create the relevant output. So bias is a very important, we talk about unconscious bias in human beings and, which is there. But the bias can also come into the, let's say, AI programs and software because it is finally humans who are training it, humans are designing it. So it depends on who is actually working on it.
Yeah.
So today, I think there are less than 20% of people who are working on AI are women.
Yeah.
So the way they design for what they design is one aspect. Second is the data that we have predominantly in the past state of history could be very much majorly male dominated in any field that you take, simply because of history and the way society was.
Yeah.
So if you use that data and train a program, it more likely will continue to give you that kind of output.
Yeah, it's a reflection
right?
of us, right?
That. So the question is, how do you control? There is an aspect of having controls, and we need to control so that it will, work on the right kind of data. How do we make the data itself more, representative so that it gives you the right output? And a bigger question is, who is responsible for it, right?
Yeah.
Finally, who is responsible for a decision that, let's say, AI tech can take? So, and then the question of transparency comes in. So if you look at all this, I think the way we will go ahead is there will be wider regulation on these kind of emerging technologies, and it is required, because that is the only way one would be able to create a more, if I want to use the word, safer and fairer, equitable world. Actually, if you see the World Economic Forum report on risks, which they bring out every year during Davos, gender inequality is one of the top risks. Yeah. And many of the countries, especially like say in India, that's one of the top 5 risks which have been quoted. Absolutely. Of course, and within digital inequality, and within that, the aspect of how will digital inequality lead to further gender inequality is something that needs to be addressed. Really addressed.
Rosemary, same point.
And I just want to add that the thing we all need to think is, can actually technology solve the problem the technology is creating? Wow. That is something we should all think about.
Yeah. So, Rosemary, you're in the, like I said, you've been across sectors. So let me ask you that question that Prabha raised, right? Do you think that we are at a point that we are well positioned to have the right technology to be able to address these errors, these possible challenges, biases that can be detrimental to the world economy, as Prabha put it?
Yeah, I think we can, because now there is enough data to, solve this alignment problem, as it's called. I was just reading a book on the alignment problem between...
That's an interesting way to put that. Yeah,
machine learning and human values, right? And as Prabha said, it's all about the data. And unfortunate truth is, we as a human race are a biased lot. Absolutely. There is data, but there is also a lot of effort and attempt to look at the data again. And that's a very important aspect. We have learned from our failures. There have been face recognition tools, there have been tools for onboarding and recruitment, all of which have been shown to have biases. And now there is a lot of work that is going on in how to unbias it. So there are clear ways that these things are being worked on. And in that, there is a lot of learning. So the good thing is that there is a lot of knowledge now on how we can unbias it. There is a lot of work and research that has gone on, which can help it. And there are some interesting aspects that today it's not just about bringing AI, ML without, the data, of course, is one important aspect, but re-looking at the data models and also understanding context in which it is used. So again, there was another book which I was reading, which was very interesting, about how an anthropologist was brought in to give views on how technology is used by different sections of society. And women definitely are one such segment where you need to understand that. And a person sitting in Tehran as a woman, or somebody sitting in India as a woman, or somebody sitting in the US as a woman, how they use technology will vary. So the study of anthropology is also giving inputs to how you can design some of this technology. And I think that there's a lot of good research that's happening around that. Really happy to see that, and a lot of matter that everybody is considering. Yeah. People like the Googles of the world, the Microsofts of the world, they've all tried all this technology. We ourselves are trying technology. And I think it's very important for us to be cognizant of this fact and look at the data with a trial run and then see what we need to do to address inclusion of everybody and making sure it is fair.
So would you then say, so Sangeeta, for instance, is data and analysis going to be a very important role, and somewhere will that also help in the larger mindset shift? You look reverse as well then, right? If that data shifts and if you're fixing that from a technology point of view, are we also mirroring that in the society?
So, very interesting. I was reading an article a few days ago, and it talked about just this, how technology is actually now being used in remote villages in Uttar Pradesh,
Yeah.
to enable women to start using it and to build businesses. And as I was saying, access is something which is a major problem. And if you look at, various societies, the tendency is that, within the country, if you see, there's a huge penetration of mobile phones.
Yeah.
But the mobile phone primarily belongs to the man. A woman can borrow the phone. So she doesn't really have she doesn't have that phone to tinker around, to play with it, to really get familiar with it and things like that. But when you give her the phone and you allow her to use it, the women there were really smart and they were able to build such amazing businesses. They started to use WhatsApp groups to find out prices of crops, to start selling, the clothes that they stitched at home, to find out which midwife would be available to deliver babies. So, so the minute you are able to break that social barrier, and the sarpanch of the village finally said that, well, the women now can use the phone if they are able to generate an income for the family with it. Wow. So, that reverse, sort of migration certainly can happen. And, technology, as Prabha was saying, technology is not just, it's not inanimate, right?
Yeah.
There's a human being behind it. And that really makes a huge difference on how we decide to build it. And as Rosemary was saying, we are learning from it. But unfortunately, even now we build it exactly the way we've built anything till now. That is, the men have built it and then we are going back to reverse engineer it or to fix it, right? So the solutions of the future definitely would be that everybody is part of the development of whatever is being built. We are beginning to see that now in companies like Twitter, who are, putting in safety, features to prevent obnoxious and abusive texts, right? Which is a huge thing for women. Safety of online is a huge thing for women. And that's one of the biggest things, in fact, when you think about the digital age for women. Yeah. The first thing is, the minute they enter it, and if they're trolled, if they're propositioned, they completely reverses their progress in that. So technology companies doing this is a really good sign now. So small steps, but definitely steps which will lead us, onwards and closer home than 140 years.
I want to dive into, that point, what are the solutions? And I love that point that you made. I love that line, humanizing technology. And that, I think there is a solution right there. But before that, Prabha, you're one of the leading faces of risk and compliance in the world. I want you to dive a little deeper into the point that you made, that it's that gender inequity and gender parity is actually something that is one of the risks to global economy, to global development. Tell me a little bit on why, and especially from an India context, or I mean, even if you look at the world context, why is that one of the key reasons as to, because I don't think people have really absorbed that. They know, but why?
See, 50% approximately of the world population is women, right? That we all know, right? But if you look at the GDP of a country and the contribution that is coming, let's say, from the population that is there in terms of who are generating income, you will find that the contribution of the women actually in the workforce is very, very low, right? And if you look at it again from a life span point of view, young women to senior women, you would again find in the corporates or in the industries or in the workforce, there's a very varied percentage of women who are contributing to the workforce. So it is not just about that, okay, as a woman, of course every woman has a choice whether to work or not. That is an individual choice. But if you look at it across the country, you would find that the quality of life, the quality of health, the quality of the citizens we are nurturing would change completely if you get women into the. Women get educated, women have access to technology, access to internet, and women are able to work, right? So I think there is even in the business, if you see, in the businesses, you would find that there are studies and research which say that women, if there are women on the boards of companies, you have much more successful companies. Right? These are all proven with research. So it is true whether it's in the family, whether it is in the corporate, whether it is in the society, the participation of women in the workforce and what the women can do when they are empowered, you would see a marked difference in the way society will evolve.
Wow.
So I think when we come back to the technology point, I just want to add one more point that we talk about inclusion, diversity, and inclusion. It's a very big topic in all corporates. But even in the technology area, we need to talk about inclusion in terms of even the design of technology. How do we bring inclusion into that? And it's not just men and women and gender, but all kinds of differences, if we have to say, and how do we bring them as an inclusive group so that whatever outcome comes out it doesn't perpetuate the kind of things we don't want to see in society, and we come to a more equitable playing field for everyone.
So let me take from that point, coming back to the concept of humanizing technology, how, to your mind, Rosemary, how can enterprises bring empathy back into technology? How do you sort of, or when you speak to enterprises, is that something that is on their agenda, and is that something that can be done with ease?
No, I think it's definitely an important part of the agenda to be inclusive. To give you an example, if we were developing a banking application. So it was so relevant to have a reach to all customer segments, right? And initially I used to wonder, we are developing a mobile app. So you think of the standard kind of app, devices. And then they were talking about all kinds of devices, and we were thinking, isn't it a headache? And then you rethink about it, that you have to have everybody have access to banking. And so you definitely need to look at any kind of device. To Sangeeta's point, right? A woman may have a very old version which was handed down by somebody else, and maybe the man has a better version, but we really need all of them to have that access. So that's an example of how, as when we bring in solutions, we have to be cognizant of these kind of solutions. Another aspect is the way we bring in design thinking. I think that's a brilliant example of you have to make sure your representative users are being, the whole thing is being tested on them, right? So the concept of design thinking today is helping us better address who really uses that particular application, right? And some of the, I think, things will have to be more, through equity driven, right? You have to bring in interventions. So today, if you have access to science and technology for everybody, including the women, I think it's important to say they have access to a device where they can learn. I mean, I remember my daughter, we logged on to Khan Academy for a particular science kind of topic which he had missed in school. And today he's even in the US doing things which are online schools even there. And that would be something so useful for the developing world where then women could access it at their homes.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you have good science and technology learning accessible from your homes through these technology solutions, I mean, it's just brilliant, right? Because you don't have the bother of our women getting the right sanitized environment when they're going to schools, colleges, and all those aspects. So there are many, many things that we can bring in.
Okay. I think one of the things we are doing, which in TCS, is really to encourage STEM education, right?
I was just going to ask you that.
Right from a young age. And I think very important for young girls to, see that, this is something they can do, whether it is science, technology, engineering, and, maths, and other related fields, So, for example, there is always this question of, if you think of a scientist, right? What comes to your mind? Right? When people think of one Einstein, I mean, when you're immediately thinking scientist or somebody
with Einstein does come to your mind.
Comes to your mind, or someone with a coat, right? A guy with a coat. We have so many wonderful women scientists in TCS.
Absolutely.
Right? But is that image doesn't, by default, it's a man's image that comes when you think of a scientist, right? So why is it so? I mean, it's a question to think, right? So, so this, the fact that we should have role models in these, in these technology fields, scientists and so on, is something that young girls should look up to and, encourage, right? I mean, in India, you take the ISRO space program, so many women, right? I mean, it's amazing, But this needs to be spoken about. We need to be, people need to be more visible. Others need to, and then naturally people would,
it sets that
children
stage
would
then.
follow. Yeah.
That point that you made.
I want to add to that. And when you talked about Einstein, so this morning when I was just preparing for this, and I was thinking about, I was reading something about algorithms and how they're skewed. I just typed in leader images in my Google, and 90% of the images that popped up were only men. Right? So to your point, that that is so even when
that's somewhere technology as well, right?
So taking from what we do on a human level, but technology itself is skewed. So there's this concept of equality tech. There's a thing called equality tech, which talks about how can we make technology equal. For example, how can we make a predictive text? Like if you type in girls, and predictive girls are, sugar and spice and all that's nice. Usually that's how girls would be. Would be those are the adjectives that would pop up related to girls. Instead of that, could it be girls are adventurous, girls are, something else. So, things like that. So that is where I think in terms of gender and digital, those are the skews which we can start looking at to really change the basic language of how we look at human beings.
There was this some ad, I'm forgetting the brand, but fight like a girl, right? I mean, that's how you slowly make those changes. I want to just quickly understand from each of you, what are you also doing? And I know the three of you have played a very important role in ensuring that inclusivity is at the very core of it. It's not even a thought, it's an action, it's sort of there in your DNA. So I want to understand a little bit, starting with you, Sangeeta. You're at a very interesting point. TCS Cares has done phenomenal work when it comes to, creating that kind of space for every human being and keeping empathy at the core of it. Tell me a little bit about what your experience has been over here.
So, definitely I think everything that we do, the minute we bring empathy to the core of what we do, starting from the top right down to the last person in the organization, the ability to look at each other, putting ourselves in each other's shoes, goes a huge way in being able to develop understanding and being able to look at things differently from an organization. We've had so many examples of, when we've done various kinds of training programs or awareness programs and things like that, and we've had people come back to us telling us how, having gone through that has changed their prism, has changed their lens, and the way they're able to talk to their people, the way they understand their people has changed. So definitely there's a huge deal that can work in that sense, and it doesn't just go from top to bottom. It also is about telling people at all levels and all layers and all different cuts within the organization how to look at somebody else. So for somebody who is a team member to understand how the challenges of a team leader, for example. That person is not just an ogre who's just trying to get you to complete your SLAs. They also have the challenges. So it cuts across all segments. And, when we do that work, it's interesting to see the aha, suddenly sort of, the ball just drops and, somebody realizes that, oh yeah, that is how I can think about it. So yeah, it is interesting.
I want to ask you, Sangeeta, very specifically, you interact with Gen Z a lot. Actually, all of you have, right? I do feel that Gen Z, or at least the new crop of young adults, they are more, for lack of a better word, that's that word that my sister was teaching me, woke. They're more woke, right? I was discussing with somebody yesterday about how Gen Z or the kids of today, so to speak, are more intolerant than we were. But in this context, isn't that a good thing? Do you see that in this context? And do you think that Gen Z will also play a role in then creating that shift, bridging that 140-year gap?
I don't think Gen Z is intolerant. They're not. They just express themselves differently. They just have a different way of looking at things. And also they're unafraid to express themselves. So, we might have had similar thoughts when we were growing up, but we were probably brought up with values like, you don't speak in front of older people like that. But today they don't think that and they don't believe that. And that is something which people who've grown up in different generations are finding very difficult to grapple with.
Yeah.
The other day when we were having this conversation, we were talking about, we actually did a session around Gen Z with the larger HR team. And at the beginning of the conversation, it was very, what do you think about Gen Z? It was very us and them, us and them. But by the end of that conversation, you could see that, people were realizing that, it's not us and them, it's just a different way. We are all us. Yeah. It's just a different way.
Also, all four ladies in this panel are very young. Just but same question to the two of you. Yeah. Are you seeing this shift in thought process, in conversations, in being very clear about what your ideals are? Sometimes it's important to define right and wrong and to talk about it. Prabha?
See, I think today's young generation, and not just whom we see in our workspace, but we have also adult children at home as their friends, and so we and in the society. I really think, like you said, they are not afraid to speak up.
Yeah,
they speak up. They are more open to taking risks than we all were at our at our age, at that age. And I also think that most of them they're very, very inclusive, very, very inclusive. They're very open and to be inclusive, that's a big shift from, maybe what it was 30 or 40, 50 years ago from the generation at that time. Also, we find that I think they all have a, they know the right and wrong and some kind of purpose, in terms of values. Let me use that. That's there, and you do things because you believe that to be right. So it's much stronger, I think, than probably earlier. And that could also be because, maybe, a generation back, people were, just trying to make ends meet. Yeah. That could also be. So that was just the only thing on people's mind, trying to make ends meet. So it's very interesting. And I think there's a lot of promise in the young generation today. And I'm sure they, of course, know how to handle technology better than all of us. And I think, therefore, if we have the right kind of controls in place, we would end up with the bright minds of today, designing and coming up with whatever is future that's going to hold for us. I don't know what it's going to be 10 years down the line. The rate at which technology is progressing, we'll probably be living in a very, a different space than
different
we are
kind
today.
of an era. We don't know if it's going to be ground or not. Rosemary, same point to you, because you interact with several, from senior executives to young freshers. Do you feel that that's where this defined sense of clarity, of very clear differentiation between inclusivity, diversity, again, right or wrong, do you feel that is more clear? Is that more there in conversations?
I think they are definitely more aware. Yeah. And like I think all of us are saying, they're more vocal. But sometimes I wonder that are they, have they developed enough resilience?
Yeah.
And sometimes that worries me. I mean, and maybe we are seeing a demographic which is similar, but there is many other segments where I don't think it is as simple. Yeah. I think there are different influences and a lot of it comes digitally to you.
Yeah.
So I'm not so confident that everybody is expressing, they are confident and they're expressing it, but is it inclusive enough? I'm not so sure always. So I think we need to reinforce that inclusivity.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's important to face a few hard knocks for you to develop that resilience. I think that's something we all, by the way of living, went through that. And I think there's nothing wrong with having those experiences to develop the resilience.
Yeah.
And again, I hope I'm not sounding negative, but I feel we have become, like the unit of one, the segment of one. In retail, we talk about segment of one. I mean, you need to be segment of many, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be exposed to different experiences, different people. And I think the drive for inclusion will help that. And technology, what we need to make sure is safeguarded against the falsehoods. And, that is a big deal. How AI/ML can solve that, I'm not sure. But I think there is a lot of work that's going on, A, to protect, and B, to give the right kind of information. I think that is very important for the young generation.
So, I mean, Rosemary's talked about something which is very, very close to my heart, so I have to say something about resilience. And this is something which absolutely, so while our younger generation is so many wonderful things, but this is one thing which is certainly something that we are seeing is an issue. And I think it is, because of the way they have been brought up. They were brought up to live in a world which was supposed to be really easy, because we were brought up in a world which was easier and simpler. We brought them up like that, but they've inherited a world which is very complex and is in turmoil. And I don't think they really have all the tools that they need to cope with that. So, which is why, but the one good thing is that they are more open. The pandemic has helped us to be able to be more open and being able to talk about the challenges that people have. We find that people are not afraid to talk about having, needing mental health support, or, feeling really low and things like that, feeling confused. So those are some of the things which are, if you have to find a silver lining on that one, that is the silver lining on that. So it is really wonderful to see that happen. And I think, from a well-being perspective, that also makes a huge difference, because we see, well-being tools being consumed by people, digital well-being, tools being consumed by younger people in a way more different way than older people did, for example, or, different. And when you talk generations, now we are literally talking every 10 years. We can't even say, beyond that, we're literally talking every 10 years. So that is one thing which we are definitely seeing.
Okay. The earlier point that I'd asked, Sangeeta, I wanted to bring in Rosemary and Prabha on that as well. Prabha, give me a sense about the work that you have seen, the work that your teams have done to ensure that this is sort of a way of life, the conversation is there, and it's kind of embedded, the inclusivity and the balance is embedded in the work.
I must actually say, being in TCS, probably given the culture of the organization, it's actually much easier, to be honest, over the years, what we have seen. So in my own team, like I said earlier, actually there are more women than men. But not because we planned it that way or anything like that. It just happened. Yeah, it just happened. I think one of the great things is when we are, looking at somebody for a role or, bringing in somebody, I don't really think, and of course it depends on the role, because some roles traditionally people say, oh, sales role, a lot of travel. I mean, this used to be in the old days. This is, I don't know whether you can do it. I mean, it's in the mind. People think like that in the mind, whether they say it or not. But I think these days, if you see, it's really about capability and competency. And that kind of thinking, I think, has greatly reduced. And that is also because of the efforts and initiatives that have been made in the organization. By the way, the concept of inclusion and the fact that we need more women leaders at the top, and increasing how that will improve the company success itself, and the way leadership thinks. But it is small drops. It has to be consistent, drops
to make an ocean.
Which keep persistent and consistently going to, whether if you want to soften somebody's mind around this, this is not something that is done in a day or two. It does take time and maybe years. But I think the important thing is to keep at it consistently. And I'm really hoping that, over time, we don't have this one Women's Day and everybody suddenly wishing all of us happy Women's Day. And, So, we are just to be decent, we say, well, thank you, and, all that, same to you and all that. But just like I don't know whether there's a happy Men's Day, or maybe there is, I don't know.
There very recently is, but not enough people celebrate it.
So the point is, we have to get to a state where, it happens because through society, through family, how we are brought up, how we bring up our children, when they come into the workforce, this is not a subject to be even, discussed. Exactly. We have to get there, but I think it has to start in the family, because people join the workforce at let's say 22, 24, whatever. You're already brought up in a certain way. It's very difficult to you can change the mindset somewhat, but cannot be completely, right? So I think personal responsibility for each one of us is to make sure that we bring up our children, and especially the boys, right? Especially in certain cultures, maybe like in India or many other countries and others, where there may be general thinking that, okay, girls do this and boys do this. One very good thing to know nowadays is many of the boys, young boys, they like to cook. And my son loves to cook, and I keep encouraging that. It's a great thing to see that. So they're not hesitant to enter the kitchen, right? This is very basic things in the house, but and many things like that which make up those, add on to those small steps, which bring us to a stage where in a workplace one doesn't really have to think, what gender are you before you consider someone for a role.
That's a very interesting thing that you said, because I always say that for me, I was raised to never know any boundaries. So, and then suddenly you go into the workforce and like, oh, really? it's not entirely correct. Rosemary, same point to you. Tell me a little bit about, even in your personal life, when you work with your teams, when you speak to clients for that matter, how are you able to integrate those solutions? Because I think each and every person is playing a role there.
Yeah, I think first thing is, the aspect of exposure, right? Especially with teams, I feel sometimes they've done one type of thing, they've been from a type of family, they are exposed to only that. So I think inclusion, the first step is exposure to a wider set of diverse aspects, whether it's people, whether it's the way to work, whether it's the roles, whether it's the geography, and some of this we learned because, we were like, if you are from Bombay, you would be sent to Delhi or Chennai, right?
Yeah.
That was a rule. So, things of why was that done? Because you need exposure.
Yeah.
And the second thing, again, another interesting book I'm reading, which is called Crucial Conversations. And I found that in my life, and I think that's what I keep trying to tell people, is that we need to express what we are thinking. We need to have sometimes those one-on-one conversations with people. I always tell my team that, I'm the coach, you guys are the players. So, I'm going to coach you, and you have to trust me that I'm coaching you. So, the conversation, good, bad, ugly, has to happen. And exposure and ability for them to work in those new environments is also as important.
Absolutely.
As leaders, as women leaders, when we grew up, in newer situations of leadership, we learned those conversations, and sometimes we did it our way, and each one has a different way.
Absolutely.
So, but it's important to have the breadth of that experience for you to really grow.
Okay, we have to get closing comments in then. So very quickly, but before we get that, one-line answers from each of you. Let's start with you, Rosemary. One stereotype or about Women's Day or women that you hate. One stereotype that you hate.
I don't know about whether it's about Women's Day, but, women should, be calm when you're talking about your point of view. You be yourself. I'm a feisty lady, so what? That's also a type of woman, and it's fine to express your opinion.
Yeah, like this thing is, I remember the first time I realized sexism was my boss from another job had once said that, I was raising a very important point and said, just go do yoga, do breathing. I'm like, if you raise this point, would you do yoga and breathing? Prabha, your worst stereotype?
I think I really don't like some of the WhatsApps which come during Women's Day. Some of them go like, women are goddesses and, mother and wife and hello. You're giving names to the, so this is, that's something which I just can't, why do you have to give names? You're just you, right? And those roles, right? So I think for women to see themselves as just themselves and not in relation to somebody else. Right? I think that's where we should get to. So no woman should think I'm somebody because I'm in relation to somebody else. Right? While the relations will be there.
Exactly.
So those Women's Day and those kind of things, especially which comes on WhatsApp, Delete.
I hate the chocolates and why are chocolates and roses connected to Women's Day? Yeah, Sangeeta, yours.
I have to say, very similar to what Prabha said about being the best mother, the woman who changed the world and everything, and putting us on this pedestal for that one day, and don't put us on any pedestal. We don't want to be on any pedestal because the next day we're going to be knocked down, and so absolutely, that's the one thing. But having said that, I actually like Women's Day.
Yeah,
I actually like Women's Day. And I wrote a little this thing on LinkedIn about it, that how it's like a brass lamp being
shined.
Yeah, at this juncture, if that wasn't there, we won't have these conversations.
Yeah.
So like what Prabha was saying, that we have to get to the point that we don't need these conversations, but right now we do.
But we do. And so while we do, I think without being put on. Without being boxed in, without being put on pedestals, and being feisty. Yes, absolutely. I think that's what it is.
Okay, now final closing comments then. Let's start with you, Sangeeta. Your vision for how you want to see gender parity in, say, let's say 2035? I'm not saying 2050, that's too far. Your vision, your dream.
Well, I think what I'd like is that when we talk about numbers in employment, when we talk about the big headlines of so many women in an organization, if that number actually is close to the number also in the boardroom, that would be my vision, especially for women in the workforce.
Okay, Prabha?
Yeah, I think a woman should, when we get to a stage where a woman is free to make her own choices, right? Yeah. Whatever it is, free to make her own choices, that will be the day when we can say we have parity. But now how do you count it, right? Because finally you need a metric and all that. So like, Sangeeta said, it's important to look at in the workplace in terms of how many women are there, are they getting the different kinds of roles that they want to do, and all the way up to the board. Yeah. That's when you can really say that you have a level playing field and it has to show in the numbers. And the numbers, it's not just the numbers, by the way, because like we say, right, it's not counting the numbers, but making the numbers count. That matters.
Rosemary?
Yeah, I think we have to go beyond putting, women in roles, because we need a woman there.
Yeah.
And I want to see that they understand the impact. And I think we've done a lot of work in companies like ours, but overall, we need to see more at the mid and the senior level, making a difference and being taken seriously.
Beautiful. Ladies, thank you so much for joining for a very, very candid conversation. I think if the four of us were to really talk, we'll take another 2-3 hours. So with that, we're going to wrap up this very, very special conversation. No boxing in, perhaps one day, no need for a Women's Day to call out. But yes, we have a huge road to walk, but the distance may get smaller bit by bit, like Prabha said, like Sangeeta and Rosemary talked about. Every drop matters. So all of us together can actually inculcate and initiate that mindset change, be it across technology, be it in our daily lives. Thank you so much for staying with us and watching this very special conversation. Thank you.